Welcome to the 2013 Carson City Classification and Compensation Study. On March 5th, Peter Ronza and Dr. Bob Green of Pontifex gave this presentation to help Carson City employees and department supervisors understand the need for this study and what information is required from you. Contact information is provided at the end of the presentation if you have any questions.
Thank you. The reason just to go to the start, the reason the city had asked for the study, it's been 14 years since they've done this, almost disco, but not quite. And a lot of things have happened in 14 years besides new jobs, technology, changes in mission, et cetera, that the city needs to start from the ground up. And I want to stress that because there's no better way for us to do this study than to go to the people who do the job. If there was, trust me, we'd do it. But this is the only way we're going to be able to build a system up from scratch, is to start from the beginning and go to the people who do the job. If there was an easier way, we'd do it. These are some of the mandates that we have as part of our contract. As I said, we're going to look at all of the jobs being done at the city, and we're going to describe them. We're going to make sure we have an up-to-date picture of what they look like. We are going to classify together those that should be. Now, just to cut off one question I've gotten at other sessions, it's a very good question. No, we don't have a quota for getting you down to 200 classifications or something. You will have the jobs that you will have, and that's what you're going to have. And the city being a little unique in that you do some things a county does and some things a city does, you're bound to have more classifications than a typical agency. But we'll wind up with whatever we wind up with. Where possible, we'll create career ladders, promotional opportunities that are easy to explain and easy to see. We're going to go out, and I'm going to describe all these in the slideshow, compensation to go along with those, monitoring the market, making sure we're paying the right rate for jobs. We're going to maintain the system, meaning when we hand this off to human resources, one of our mandates is to make sure that they can maintain this in the future and that this won't break apart. Example I like to use is, this is like a car. If I buy a car and I don't change the oil and I don't check the air, it's going to break apart. So we're going to make sure that they can maintain this. So as new jobs come in, as job reclass requests come in, they can do it all along the same system and keep the whole system moving along and keep it current. And provide all the backup and for the compensation part, which again, I'm going to get to that in this slideshow. Let's be clear what this study is not. This is not an efficiency study. I don't care if you have 4 animal control officers and you should have 5, or if you have 3 baristas and you have 2, forget it. We don't do those studies. We are here to describe the work that is now being done at the city, period. And that's what we're going to come up with. It's not cost cutting because the jobs are what they are. They exist right now, and that's what we're going to describe. So that's a whole kind of different study that we don't do, but sometimes people do believe that one of these studies has an ulterior motive. The board and management have made it very clear we need to fix this thing and we need to get it going. Because all through this, the theme that you're going to see me say, and everybody, private or public, has a system like this for one purpose and one purpose only, to be able to hire people and keep them from being kidnapped by another agency. And that's what the system does. If you can't hire talent and you can't keep talent, then things are going to go horribly wrong. So that's the whole purpose behind this effort, is to make sure the city can continue to do that. These are some of the study tasks that I've spoken about. I want to emphasize on the employee communications end. This is the beginning of that. As we meet with all of you, answer your questions, show you what we need from you. All of the things will be posted on the intranet. You'll have a video of this presentation. There's a lot of FAQs. In fact, during all of these sessions, Melanie is writing down the questions. So it doesn't matter which session you were at, you're going to have a long list of questions and answers that were asked at this session. There's also resources there to help you in completing these questionnaires. It's critical that you are as knowledgeable as you can be because you are providing the information to us. If you ever have a question of any kind, call your supervisor, call HR. You can email me, or you can shop for answers and email all of us and see which answer suits you the best. But don't sit there in this study and have a question and don't get it answered, because that's just going to mean that something coming to me is not going to be as accurate as it should be because you don't know what you were supposed to do. We want to make sure that you know what to do. These are the stages of the study that I'm going to go through. The first one's where we are now. We're establishing a schedule. We met with the management. We're meeting with you guys and the employees, getting to know the city. One of the things that the city will be working on, this is just an example, is a compensation philosophy. A compensation philosophy is like the foundation of the house. You can't build the house without having the foundation. It explains why you pay the way you do. Where do you pay? Who do you compare yourselves to? So I gave you a real diet version here so that you can see this. This is something the city will be working on that will be of value to employees, stakeholders, the board, but it also determines how you go out and attract and retain talent. What you guys are going to do for me, nice people that you are, is you're going to complete these questionnaires. And I'm going to walk through that after his presentation. Your supervisor very soon, if not already, will inform you of when you need to get the questionnaire to them. They have a deadline jumping to the end here of March 25th to get it to Human Resources. But there's a portion of the questionnaire that they have to complete. So they'll let you know, hey, I need you to have it to me by X date. Human Resources will be shipping all of these by electronic means out to people. We've asked the supervisors that those people who do not have access to electronic get a paper copy. You can complete this by paper. You can complete this electronically, whichever makes you happy. It's a Word document and electronic, so you can just go crazy with it. Every employee at the city is to fill one of these out. However, if you do the same thing as 3 or 4 of your coworkers and you want to get together and have a keg of beer and just go through this, that's fine. Just remember, I'll be grading all your jobs based on that one questionnaire. But that's perfectly fine that you do that. When I get to the questionnaire, I'll just need all your names, because as they come in, HR will be ticking them off to make sure we didn't miss anybody. But no one can be forced into filling one of these out in a group. So if you don't like your 4 coworkers and you want to fill out your own, that's great too. We'll take them any which way, but I'm not trying to make this painful. Another thing that may help you, you've got job descriptions online right now for your jobs. I'm doing this analysis without paying any attention to those. I'm not paying attention to whatever title you have, what pay grade you have, what bargaining unit you're in. I don't pay attention to that. I'm looking at this. But you may find things in your job description that are good, that you want to use. Paste and cut. I'm not asking you to reinvent the wheel. If you got stuff there that can help you, just move it on over into the questionnaire. That's your choice. But don't feel like you have to rewrite everything, reword everything. If something already is there that is appropriate for you to describe. Once you're done, you're going to give it to your supervisor. Your supervisor is going to fill out comments. They are prohibited from writing anything or altering anything that you do. Then they will provide you a copy of their comments, and then they will ship the questionnaire to Human Resources. So you will have in your hands, when this is done, a copy of the questionnaire that you filled out and a copy of the comments that they put in there. And I'll tell you where that's going to come in handy in a minute. And then they'll ship those to HR. They'll ship them to me. I will go through them, get back with people electronically, by phone. I'll be here physically, going through answering questions on the questionnaires that come up as I'm reading through them. Then I'm going to classify the work, or what you would more commonly call getting job descriptions written. A job description is just a Reader's Digest version of the questionnaire. So bear this in mind when I ask you to review your job description. The number one complaint is going to be, this doesn't have everything that's in my questionnaire. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to be a description that's a condensed version that has the most important information. I'm going to ship you those job descriptions, and I'm going to ship them to your supervisor for you to give me comments, any revisions that you feel that I missed something or misworded anything. Then I'll review those. I will contact you guys back, and then I'll start grouping the jobs into classifications, no different than what you have now. You know, grouping jobs into common classifications where I can. Then I will grade the jobs and create a classification structure. similar to what you have, an internal structure, a hierarchy from director on down. These are the things that I will be looking at when I look at a job. Now, the one thing I have to tell you, and don't take this the wrong way, is I'm looking at your job as if you weren't in it. I like to tell supervisors sometimes when I'm doing this, if Sparky won Megabucks, and you asked them to, before you leave, write up what you do so I can replace you, this is the kind of exercise we're going through. And that's going to be hard for you. It's going to be very hard for you, because it's going to be very hard, first of all, for you to describe your job, because that's abnormal. Nobody ever asks, what do you do every day? I show up to work. You know, I'm asking you to do that, but then I'm compounding that by asking you to describe your job as if you weren't in it, as if we had to hire somebody. And these are all the things that I look at. Knowledge, skills, the different kinds of relationships, internally and externally. All of these come into play when we're trying to determine A, what is your job, and B, how does your job fit within the system with all the other jobs, both like it and nothing like it. These are the kinds of questions a normal person who has absolutely no idea what you do for a living should get out of a job description. So if I had no clue what you did, and I had your job description, I should be able to answer these questions right here. That's the whole purpose of the document. Also, we do have some legal mandates on parts of the job description that we must comply with. Duties and responsibilities, all of these things have to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So for example, if I have to accommodate somebody in a job, the information you give me in the questionnaire is going to allow me to get a picture of working conditions, physical demands, etc., to see how and if I can accommodate. Fair Labor Standards Act, among many things, regulates overtime provisions. Federal law stipulates who can be a salary job and who can be an hourly job based on passing federal tests. We have to pass all the jobs as part of this process through that. Age Discrimination and Employment Act, to make sure that nothing in the job description would discriminate against somebody over the age of 40. And then Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. So we make sure as we write these things that they comply with all those legal mandates. So these are the things when I send you to review that you'll be looking at. You'll be looking at your classification grouping and let me know if you believe you're in the right one or not. Duties, about 90% of what I get is this right here, wording and responsibilities. I kind of wrote this other word, or the meaning that you have isn't really, because you guys are closer to your job than me, you'll know that. And because we're we're shooting at a moving target, stuff is going to happen at the city while we're doing this. People will get promoted, people will get hired, people will leave, jobs will change. So we've got to nail those down too during this review process. And as I said, every employee and every supervisor will receive a response back from me on their review. Here's things I'm not going to consider. So just want to get this out front. I don't care how long you've been in your job. I'm looking at your job. So whether you've been here 3 years or 20 years, I'm looking at your job. I don't look at where you are in your salary range. I really don't care. That has nothing to do with this process. I will not consider any training credentials or experience that are not required by your job. An example I've used in other groups, when I used to be at the county, in Clark County, at McCarran Airport, I had a custodian who had a master's degree in Russian. And he wanted to be reclassified because he felt, well, I help Russian tourists when they get lost, so I should be a translator. It's like, well, if I look at your job duties, you're a custodian. It's nice that you know Russian, but if you don't know the language, you still got to show them where the bathroom is. So it is not required of your job. But many of you do have licenses and certifications that are required of your job. Those I need to see. Some of you will have ones that aren't. That does not come into consideration. Again, think of if I left the job, what would replace me? That's what I'm looking for. What are the essential credentials and training? I also am not going to consider whether you have too much work or too little work. If you're understaffed or overstaffed, I'm looking at the job, not on how your supervisor assigns workload. Workload does not equal classification. Workload is a work issue. So I'm not going to look at that. I also don't care how well or how poorly you do your job. That's something between you and your supervisor. I want the job. And then over time, FLSA designation is mandated by law, so that is not anything that I will be looking at grading jobs. There's salary jobs that pay less than hourly and the other way around. The FLSA designation has absolutely nothing to do with grading jobs. Let's talk about the compensation study. And I'm going to show you in other slides what the comparables are that the city has chosen. The whole purpose, again, of the compensation study is to make sure that you can still attract and retain people. You don't want to become a training ground for other organizations. I'm also going to look at benefits, but some benefits. Now, you're in PERS, everybody's in PERS, there it goes. But I want to see other benefits that your competitors offer to see if that's something we should be doing. I want to see the ratios of what people are paying for health insurance. I didn't say cost because all insurance is purchased locally. So it's irrelevant for me what they're paying in Southern Nevada for insurance because that market is a different buying market than Northern Nevada. But what are the rates? Are there any benefits they're offering that the city might want to offer? Are they offering them differently? Those are pieces of information we need to see. We've identified the organizations. I'm going to show you those. Benchmark positions, to explain that, are positions that you have in common with other organizations. It goes without saying the vast majority of your jobs do not exist in the private sector. So the vast majority of your jobs are going to be compared to your peers in the public sector. We don't look at titles. We look at description of work. So I got to pick on animal control again. If I have an animal control officer, I give them a description of animal control officer. Here's what my animal control officer does. And then I go to somebody else and say, do you have one of these? Yeah, but our animal control officer is also a barista. So okay, that's not a good match. We go with common jobs that are comparable across organizations so that when we do apples to apples comparison, we have that linearity there. So those are the jobs that we're going to be comparing with at City of Carson City. I collect the data, I get back with the respondents and make sure it's all accurate. I run statistical analysis. I will then develop new pay ranges for those and look at, again, practices that your competitors have that you may want to get into. These, just to give you an idea, when we go out and do surveying, these are some of the areas that we look at when we're looking at who are our comparators. And this is just a chart to show you that geography sometimes comes into this. So using the example, Director of Public Works. Director of Public Works wins megabucks and leaves. I probably want to go national, at least regional, to go find another one. I probably won't find one across the street, just not going to. So it just goes to show you in any organization, geography sometimes comes into play with different groups that exist in an organization when you go out and compare yourself. The city has decided, and there's some slides here as far as municipalities. We're going to look at Reno, Sparks, Henderson, Las Vegas, and North Las Vegas. I'm in the middle of one of these studies with the city of Henderson, and we have data for all of Southern Nevada. We're also going to look county-wise because you do have functions that normally a county provides, at Churchill, Clark, Douglas, Lyon, and Washoe. For library jobs, we're going to look at the major libraries in play here in Nevada. And there's also some other agencies that have some of your jobs. For example, Metro in Vegas does all of the law enforcement and detention. I already have the Henderson data because they have their own in North Las Vegas, but we need to get data from them. Your major school district employers here in the area, of course the state of Nevada, and RTC Washoe County, which has some engineering jobs and alike jobs that you also have. So we're going to make sure we do that. Now, when I finish the comp study, I then hand that information off to the Human Resources Department because by law they have to negotiate wages with the unions. So they will have all my information, the survey info, the recommended ranges, impacts, all of that stuff, and they will sit down at the table and they will negotiate the pay ranges that go in the system. So you'll see kind of a disconnect between the study ending in around July and then them sitting at the table and getting the other part done. But they have to do this by law. They have to negotiate wages. And also, they will discuss and negotiate any and all impacts of implementing this new system in the workforce. So you'll be hearing more about that later, but just to let you know, that is a part of the study that happens after we're done doing all of our duties. Now, we've guaranteed the city that we'll be available for 1 year free of charge to help them through that process. So if we have to recrunch numbers, if I have to go chase some more data, if I have to buy liquor for the negotiation sessions, all of that stuff, we'll do that. But I don't want you thinking, oh, the guy said the study's over, what am I making? They have to go through that process. Market analysis, just to finish this off, is not going to do certain things. So I want to clear that up. It's not going to value you as an employee. It just tells me what the going rate is in the market. You get paid in accordance with what the city values you, years you've been here, skills you bring to the job. It doesn't tell me, oh, for somebody who's got a bachelor's, they get this, and a master's this, and whatever. It doesn't tell me that. It doesn't value your performance. It just tells me what the rate is out there, not a rate for good people and a rate for bad people. It also doesn't reflect your internal hierarchy, and let me explain that. I talked about the compensation philosophy before. Sometimes organizations will value certain jobs because of strategic objectives or other reasons higher than others. I use the example when I worked in healthcare, we had a compensation philosophy that we would pay our jobs at market, but certain jobs that were critical towards our expansion, we would pay 25% above market. And of course, my own HR people would come whining to me, why aren't you paying me this? And the whole reason was because the expansion, the CEO considered it was critical to retain talent during this expansion period. So he was willing to spend the money to jack their wages up above market, and then after that, level them back down. So internal decisions that are made by an organization are not reflected by the market. And very importantly, the market will never ignore supply and demand, you will. So if there's a scarcity of jobs, and we still have some red hot jobs out there that people are chasing, very few people, and there's a lot of people wanting them, the city's got to make a decision. You either pay the market rate or you don't get anybody. We don't want the city to be in that kind of a situation, which is why we're doing this study. But you can't just go out there in the market and say, I refuse to pay that because I won't pay it. Well, then you're not going to get somebody. Or you'll get somebody who's unskilled, or somebody who's a cast-off from another organization. So we have to prevent the city from getting in a situation where they're non-competitive or where their people are taken away from other organizations because they haven't paid attention to that supply and demand issue. We're going to hand this off, like I said, to human resources. Normally, system is maintained. It can last at least 10 years, no problem. You don't have to go through this in another 3 or 4 years unless you totally blow it and don't maintain it. But we will make sure that they have the training, the tools, and the support to continue this so that as new jobs come up at the city, as reclassifications come up, as new jobs come up that they need to go out and get market rates for, they will be able to handle this and keep the system going and not having to be revised again, so that internal and external equity are maintained. So at the end, this is all of what we're providing the city. And the good news is, because you're public sector, most of this will be a public record. Unlike a private sector organization can put it in a drawer. And then I will be back in July to do presentations to anybody the city wants me to, board, employees, bargaining units, whatever. So these are all the deliverables that we will bring to the city. So at the end, this is kind of what we have, an internal system of rating jobs tied to the outside, valued and maintained. Let me walk you through the questionnaire. The first page is just so I know where you are, who you are, how do I get a hold of you, who's your supervisor, how do I get a hold of them. I have a box here that says length of time and position. What I'm trying to get at here is people who are new in their job may not, and you'll see as I go through this what I mean, may not know the full scope of their job because they haven't been there long enough. So I'm going to lean on their supervisor a little bit more when I read it and say, okay, this person's kind of new or they've just been promoted. Did they really describe this appropriately? Are there any areas here that we need to go research, etc.? It doesn't mean anything other than that. It's just a flag to me that this is one I better make sure I touch bases with the supervisor even if the supervisors give me comments, just to make absolutely sure that I've got a good picture of this job. Because in all fairness to the person who's in it, they haven't done it for a year, let's say, or so. They don't know. So that's this front page. The second page, just a brief 1 or 2 sentence, not 3 paragraphs, I've gotten those. If I was sitting at a bar with you, which is another weird story, but if I was sitting at a bar with you and you said, I do this for the city of Carson City, and I said, what is that? You could describe in a sentence or 2 what it is I do. So if I'm the director of public works, you know, I do water, wastewater, snow removal, blah, blah, blah. If I'm a social worker, I do this. Just a short description that would describe to somebody who has no idea what you do for a living, because trust me, there's going to be plenty of room for you to give me the other stuff. And then I want you to draw me an org chart, because even though I'm getting org charts from the city, they may not be up to date, or there may have been some recent changes. So who's your supervisor? What's their title? What's your name and title? Who are people that report to you? Now, by report to you, I mean anybody. It could be you're an official supervisor. It could be that you're a project lead, that you manage contractors, volunteers, inmates, whatever. I need to know that here. Now, you don't have to give me everybody's name. Just give me some titles, give me an idea. And then, who are your coworkers? You can just give me titles. So I'm a maintenance worker. My coworkers are maintenance workers. That's what I'm looking for. Just a little org chart here that you're going to give me that describes to me the world that you live in, as you're now going to describe to me your job. This is going to be the toughest section of this form. And by the way, I recommend you not try to do this form in one sitting. Do it, come back to it. You might get an idea in the shower, write something down. This is something that's going to take you a while because, again, I'm asking you to do something unnatural, which is think of what you do, which nobody makes you do that. But the rest of this form you're going to see is fast because it flows all from this. These are your essential duties and responsibilities. And what I mean by that is if I took this away from your job, it would alter your job. There's a lot of things you do that wouldn't do that. Okay, I have to clean this machine, or I have to drive the... No, I want the essential things of what is it that makes your job what it is. I provided you with 9 blanks because normally you're going to have 5 to 8. But again, if you want to go crazy and give me some more, that's fine. But I gave you that because it should be about 5, 6, 7, or 8. Your job description could come in handy here because you'll see your job description is formatted that same way. It has a section that says duties, and it compresses those into major duties. So think of that. That's what I'm looking for here, the major elements of your job. To help you, I've given you this column too, where you can say daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. Some of you work on a cycle. Some of you work on a fiscal year or seasonality, or it's tied to something else. So you may do some things in a certain part of the year that you don't do the whole year. They're still as important, but they're done less frequently. Example, if I am a manager, I have to do a budget. I only have to do that once a year and it doesn't take me that long, but it's a critical part of my job. So I need to make sure that I put that down there. And it's giving you a way to think of your job through a whole year. What do I do through a whole year? Some things I do every day, some things I don't. Percentage of time, after you've written all these out, is just take, let's say you have 8 of them, and try to make them come up to 100%. A couple words of caution here. This doesn't mean that something that's 40% is going to be worth more than something that's 5%. I'm just trying to get an idea of how you spend your time. The 5% thing could be much more important than the 40%. It's not what I'm after. I just want to get a handle on where does this job, these duties, spend their time on those duties that they've given me. If you're an engineer and you feel a need to go into decimals, knock yourself out. But I'm really just looking at an estimate. And don't go over 100. Just try to fit it in there. This isn't hyper accurate. Just give me, I have 8 duties, and if I cut it into a pie of 100%, this is how it goes. This helps me in the analysis process. So this is going to be the toughest section you're going to do right here. And you'll see there's 2 pages. Again, you can expand that. Once you get through there, now every section ties off the other section. So here, you've just described to me what you do for a living. So what are the knowledge and skills that you need to do that? And you're tying them back to the previous page. So if I have to know how to run chemical analysis of wastewater, then what do I need to know from a knowledge and skill standpoint to be able to do that? I need to know chemistry, I need to know how to do this and that. So all of this ties back to the section you did. You're just tying it back. This could also cause you to go back to the first section and revise some of the things you did, because you realize now that maybe you didn't describe them in a certain way and you want to describe them a little better. That's great. But this all ties to that first section. The next section ties to the section you just filled out. So now that you've told me what the knowledge and skills are that you need, how do you get them? I'm asking you for the minimum amount of education, not what you have, what field it should be in, the amount of minimum amount of years, and in what field. And this is very important, any certifications, registrations, anything that is required for you to do your job. Let me give you an example, because my wife's a nurse. For her to practice as a nurse in the state of Nevada, if she was here, she would have to have a license as a registered nurse. That's a done deal. But you can get a license with an associate's, a bachelor's, a master's, or a PhD. You can have 4 different educational levels to get that license. So the minimum would be the associate's. Doesn't mean you're going to hire somebody at that, but it means the minimum to come in the door to be able to do this job, you got to have the license, you're going to have an associate's, and probably, depending on the job, a certain amount of years of experience. Again, this goes back to that slide I showed you on federal mandates. But make it clear, A, doesn't mean that's how you're going to hire, but it also doesn't mean that this is going to have an impact on you. We're talking about impacts. These are one of the impacts that collective bargaining won't do. You are going to stay in your job regardless of what happens in this section, because you are doing the job. But we have to do an independent analysis to justify that the city is asking for minimum requirements that are not discriminatory or not skewed to hire a certain person or a certain group of people. So I know this is a tough one for people, because when they get their job descriptions back, I guarantee you somebody's going to say, oh my gosh, you're undervaluing my job because you put that there. No, I'm just putting the minimum. It's nothing personal, but I have to default to what the minimum is. Does that make sense? And this all ties off the last section. If you say you need knowledge of chemistry, I would expect to see that you would need some education in chemistry, whether it be a degree or whatever. So it's all tying off the last section. They all flow off each other. In the next section, and I gave you boxes just to give you a rest as you're going through this, this is the supervision section. There's all kinds of different supervision, from managing teams, volunteers, to hiring and firing and disciplining. You check all the boxes that apply, and then you just let me know how many people or a range of people right here. This gives me a good picture of how much you have to take care of people, projects, contractors, etc., because I need that info. Next section, how much latitude do you have in your job to get your job done? You pick the category that fits, and actually also I'm asking you in this section of problem solving, give me a typical problem that you would handle on a typical day. Please don't give me the, I say I de-armed the nuclear device in the James Bond movie, etc. I'm just looking at typical things. So I work at the permit center, I process the permits, I have to make sure that the developer knows what the deadlines are, what the requirements are met, all the forms are submitted, I have agenda deadlines, etc., etc. This fleshes out this section in showing me what your freedom of action and discretion and independent judgment are. This is also critical towards the FLSA test later when I run it, because one of the federal mandates is discretion and independent judgment. So this fits perfectly with that. Again, if you need to get more room, you can always add. Equipment that you need to do your job. Is there any equipment that you have to do your job, that you have to operate? List that here. If it's hardware or software, list that here. If it's specialized, please use the language that you use. Don't worry about me, because I'll call you if I don't understand what you're talking about. But use the language that you use, the terms that you use. Don't worry about me. I'll find out. And working conditions, if you're in an office setting, you're right here. But if you do have to go out of the field, or you do spend most of your time in the field, or if you're in a dangerous situation like dog bites or something, you've got these boxes and then percentage of time that you estimate that you're in those situations. This, again, going back to ADA, gives me a good feel for how environmental conditions impact the performance of your job. And along with that, we have the ever popular lifting and the different categories. So pick the category that most closely fits your job on a day-to-day basis. And it goes from sedentary to heavy work. You now have an additional comment section. If there's anything at all that you think I missed, this is where you get her done. Some people like to attach copies of things like an NRS or something like that. Knock yourself out. Just don't give me the encyclopedia. It's not one of those where if yours weighs heavier than the other one, you're worth more. I'm not going to do that. But I want you to give me, at the risk of giving me more information than I need, I'd rather have that than too little. So if you really think that I didn't hit something here, this is your opportunity. Then you're going to give the questionnaire to your supervisor by whatever date your supervisor told you to give it to them. They have this one section, of course, they could add additional pages, where they're going to tell me I have reviewed the questionnaire and I either agree with it or here are comments. 90% of what I get from supervisors are things that employees forgot. And that's natural because the employee's like this close to the job. Supervisors are seeing the big picture. And this has even happened to me when I've had to do this. It's like, you dope, you forgot that you do this. Oh gosh, how did I forget that? That's 90% of what I get. The supervisor cannot alter or change or write over or do anything on your comments. This is their section to give me information that I need. Likewise, there's no good way to say this. Supervisor is obligated to give me feedback. They can't play that popular game show of, I'll just say I agree. If my employee got what they wanted, I could say I supported them 100%. If the employee didn't get what they wanted, I can say, well, it's those consultants. They stink. They don't know nothing about this place. The supervisor is an active participant because they assign the work. There's two people in this equation, the people who do the work, the people who assign the work. Neither one of them can take a pass on this. So they have got to help me draw a complete picture of this job. That is their requirement. Then, as I said, they will provide you a copy of this, hand it to you, and then they will send this form to Human Resources so they can then send it to me and we can get this going. And just a word of advice, I'm not new to this, so flowery language, unicorn pictures, whatever, it's not going to work. Use your language. All I ask is, if you do handwrite this, I need to read it. But don't think because you're using certain language or something, you're going to get more points or something. I just want to read these. I can smell the BS a mile away. And remember, I'm going to have to follow these up anyway. Some of your jobs are very familiar to me, and some will not be, and that will cause me to have to go in and make sure I have an accurate picture of them, because I've done this for a while. But just speak your language. If you don't feel confident about your skills in writing, talk to your supervisor, talk to HR. If you think that that's going to be a detriment, you've got help out there, ask for it. So don't be bashful, because this is important. We only get one swipe at this, and then we got to get going. So you guys are really what's going to give us the info to get this done. I was with Clark County for 9.5 years, went through 3 of these kinds of studies of different kinds over there. Our population, was a little bit larger, it's 10,000. We have done recent studies in Nevada in the last couple of years. RTC of Southern Nevada. We're in the midst of helping the Southern Nevada Health District do their negotiation part. They finished their study, so they're negotiating. We're in the middle of doing the Henderson study, and we just finished, I got to see them tomorrow, the Animal Foundation. We fixed them up and got them all going and got them ready to go. We have tons of sources here in Nevada. I'm very familiar with economy, the labor market. I've had to be in Melanie's shoes, so I understand the role of a practitioner and that of a consultant. I get both sides of the picture. Bob has a PhD after his name. He is actually one of the experts in the field, has written most of our certification programs. He is also worked in we have a project going at the Department of Energy at the Nevada Test Site. It's a pretty large project where we're taking 3 different work groups and combining them into one classification system. And it's a whole lot of people. We've also, recently done some work with what would be relevant here, wastewater and water facilities in Denver and Cincinnati. This is our contact info. Melanie will be the project manager contact for the city. Again, I beg you, if you have a question, get a hold of somebody. Supervisor, HR, whoever it is, get your question answered, because it's very important that you can go into this knowing what you got to do. Thanks for showing up. Thanks.